Welcome back to the Simply Wild podcast. I am your host, Sadie Jane, and we are here to come back to the wild within us. I think my tagline's always different, like every time, but I'll get there. I'll figure it out. We are on part 4 of my life, my journey, and we are getting into the nitty gritty plant medicine. Plant medicine people, we're here for it. We're talking about it with the huge caveat and disclaimer that I genuinely do not think it's for everybody. I think there's a lot of paths to healing. I think there's a lot of paths to awakening. I think there's a lot of paths to finding out who you truly are. And one of them is plant medicine. And, when I was beginning my spiritual journey, I had to untangle or understand my own truth around this idea of communing with things from the earth, because some people believe that it's not connected to God. But it was so clear to me, every single thing that the earth is made of, every single thing has a purpose. And God, higher consciousness, the universe, literally put everything on this earth with a purpose. So of course an amethyst would help with spiritual awakening. Of course a rose quartz would help with self-love, right? Of course lavender can help calm your mood and chamomile can help you sleep. Every single thing has a purpose. And the moment I realized how powerful it is to have connections like this and have things like this around us all the time. We tend, at least in America, to live in a very concrete jungle, in a world with sidewalks and perfectly manicured lawns with Roundup and perfectly white walls. And I'm not against any of that, except it can be so ungrounded. We wonder why we're not connected to ourselves. We wonder why we're not connected to the earth. We wonder why we feel so ungrounded or feel so anxiety, anxious, so anxiety filled or filled of depression. I really believe we have lost the connection that our ancestors had to the land. And so that was a really random spurt of information that I just felt inspired to share, because I'm looking at my altar right now and I have all these crystals and I have all of these plants and we're talking about plant medicine. And I will say that Mother Earth truly has been one of my biggest allies in my life and has helped me come back home to myself in a deeper way than anything. And she holds us. And yes, I do refer to the earth as a woman because that's how I feel. And if you read an ancient text, that's also how she is referenced. And she is the most wise, even more wise than AI, even more wise than technology. She has her own seasons. She cleanses and clears herself. She knows what's most important to her. And man, we just do not worship. We do not honor her as much as we should, because literally we would not exist. We would not be able to exist without her. And thankfully, the earth has been put together in such a beautiful, meticulous way, beautiful, engineered, magnificent, ancestral, celestial way that it helps us. It benefits us, every single bit of it. Also, it requires respect, because if it doesn't get it, it'll show us that. And so my path to bettering my understanding or my relationship with Mother Earth started, or I guess I could say it started with plant medicine. And I think I began my spiritual journey believing that I would find a cure. I'd find a cure for my depression. I'd find a cure for my anxiety. I'd find a cure for sadness. I'd find a cure for my doubts. I'd find a cure for my feelings of shame or guilt or unworthiness. And so there was many years where I kept searching. Little did I understand the sacred concept of polarity, of duality, that guess what? We can't fix that. In fact, it's actually a huge piece of why we're here, to feel every single range of emotions. And I'm realizing now, and I realized with my education in the next, couple years as I continued on my spiritual path and became equipped and certified in all of these different healing modalities and all of these different, taking all of these different courses in education, and now obviously teach them myself. I'm realizing that the only reason why we have a negative attachment to an emotion, while this is kind of a tangent, but I'm going to go there. The only reason we have a negative attachment to an emotion is because we have a negative experience with that emotion. So for me, I had a negative attachment. I had shame and guilt connected to this concept of sadness because that was my first memory of sadness. So it's all intertwined, right? As long as we can heal the inner child, as long as we can heal our attachments to these emotions, we can experience them without angst. We can experience them without shame. We can experience the sadness just as high as we can experience the happiness. We can experience melancholy and understand that there's a peace for that. There's a peace for that in as far as creation goes, and as far as sitting with stillness goes, and feeling those feelings and feeling the grief and allowing it to move through us rather than feeling shame and guilt around them. So a big piece of that, my understanding of that, was finding hypnotherapy first. I'm so grateful for the path that I've found, everything that I have, because it's clear. Like if I was to do a timeline and like lay it all out for you guys with this like big long paper and be like 1992 and 1994, you would see, at least for me, everything, single thing has come into my life exactly perfectly. Okay. So I'm on this spiritual path and I'm trying to understand the meaning of life, and I'm trying to understand myself better. And I start getting it. Like I start really getting it. And also, so everything starts to get brighter. The cool thing about healing, especially subconscious healing, is that you stop living so much in your head and you start living more in your consciousness. That's truly what yoga and hypnotherapy did for me. Because at that point, we're going to stick kind of there, because then I move into like plant medicine, which then opens up this whole nother level of like astrology and human design and somatics and all these things. But what I realized before I found hypnotherapy, what I realized is that I was living in my head all the time. I was allowing all of those emotions that I had deemed or defined as bad or good with shame or guilt. I allowed them to take over my life. It just felt like I was drowning. There was just no way out. And when you live in your subconscious mind, you're consistently never present. You're consistently thinking, and you talk about anxiety and depression. Anxiety is fearing for the future. Depression is thinking about the past. Those moments, those feelings, and then obviously there's the chemical imbalance that comes to that. I want to make sure I note that because it's very real. But a lot of it comes and stems from, and then perpetuates itself from not being present. And it's really hard to be present if you're always in your mind all the time. And our subconscious mind is like 95% of our thoughts and beliefs. It's a lot of it. So it takes a lot of discipline to be conscious. So what I realized is that everything became brighter when I started living in consciousness. Like I started noticing the leaves. I started noticing the beautiful prints on the leaves. I started noticing the textures. I started noticing if there was like a bite out of it from a snail, or I started noticing leaves of grass and the dew on the leaves of grass. I just started slowing down and realizing that that was the point. Like I was consistently chasing to try to find my worth, to try to find my place, to try to find my truth, when really it was all about slowing down. And, finding yourself amongst motherhood is not something that is easy. And I mean, of course I can only speak to my specific earth side experience with this specific body and this specific experience. But I would imagine it makes it more difficult because you get like a sliver of time when you heal, and then you have kids crying and you have diapers to change and you have falls and bumps and scrapes. But also it was like, I felt like it was the deepest initiation I could have given myself, because I was consistently having to tell myself again and again and again, you deserve this. You can do this. You can do this and take time for yourself. You can choose yourself amongst motherhood. It is important and it's possible. So I was living life more vibrantly. I was figuring things out, at least I thought. And then my son, sweet Henry, when he was about 6 months old, he bumped his head. So he had the biggest head. It was so cute. And he was in our home, in our Sugar House home, which is where we lived, like in Utah, like a suburb of Salt Lake, a little small home under 1,400 square feet. And it had all wood floors and tile. And he was just constantly falling, learning how to walk and constantly falling. And one night I was making dinner and we had these like really cheap, lightweight IKEA chairs, and he crawled and he stood up and was holding onto the IKEA chair, and he lost balance and it fell back. He fell back and hit his head on the tile, and I heard a huge crack. I turn around and grab him. And of course, as a nurse, I'm like assessing him. I'm like checking his pupil dilation. Is he passing out? Is he throwing up? All those things. And none of that had happened. And then we were sitting the next week. He was sitting on my lap and I was feeling on his head. And I could feel that there were 2 bumps on both sides of his head. And he had hematomas on his head, which is internal bleeding, essentially. It's just like a little pocket, like a little blood clot right underneath the subcutaneous tissue, which is like right underneath the skin. So I panic and I call his pediatrician, and she takes me in. And anyway, it was like this whole thing because she was like, well, if he's not having any side effects and he's acting fine, and he's probably fine. But I just had a feeling, I had a feeling. I was like, no, this needs to be looked at. She's like, okay, but if I'm telling you, like, if you want a CT scan, you have to go through primary children's, you have to go through the ER, which means you have to have like a full body head to toe abuse assessment on this child. And I was totally fine with that because I had nothing to hide. But she was just trying to protect me. She's like, let me talk to my people. She was like this incredible doctor in Salt Lake who's very well known. And I became really, really good friends with her. And I ultimately decided to override her opinion. And I was like, let's take him in. So we go to the ER. I'm just like scared at this point. And you guys, the x-rays are so awful. He had 2 huge fractures on both sides of his skull. And that's where the bleeds came from. And one of them had a teeny bit of a brain bleed, like a teeny bit. The hardest part about head injuries is they don't start to do anything. They don't really start to take action until it's almost too late, until they see the passing out, until they see the seizures, until they see these things. So it was interesting because the doctor came in and she had just been in like a 32-hour surgery or something on the sweet baby. And I was holding Henry and I see the x-rays and I'm bawling. And she's like, this is the child that I'm seeing on these x-rays. They don't look the same. Because usually when she sees something like this, they have side effects, like something's happening. And so anyway, then we go and we have to get like a full body x-ray because they have to do they send social services in, they like do all of this thing. Everything obviously turned out fine. And there were no other signs and we were fine. We could go home, but there was nothing you could do. There's nothing you could do. She said, you have to, for the next 6 weeks, he cannot fall and he cannot bump his head. But you cannot stop him from walking and crawling because he has to learn how to get strength. He has to learn how to become non-wobbly. Like he has to like, I'm like, okay, how's that going to happen? So I can't let him fall, but I have to let him walk. It was a really dark time for me because I felt really helpless and hopeless for him. Because she did essentially say if he does hit his head one more time, it could result in a serious brain bleed. She also said that it would fuse back together stronger than ever. So he'd have like this solid head, which, if you know Henry, he's 6 now. He is such a solid, wild, busy, crazy human. I cannot even tell you. All of my kids are super, super wild, but he is like insane. Okay, so 6 weeks is happening. So I'm like, okay, this is not ideal and terrifying. And also, I also want to note that I'm trying to like think back to all of my situations with my children as far as physical situations. This is easily at that point, the scariest thing I've had to deal with in parenthood, which is saying a lot. I feel very, very, very lucky and very blessed that we haven't had any other serious injuries. My kids have always been really, really healthy. So we get home and I, talk to the doctor. And at this point, we're like texting each other, right? Because she's like invested. And this is like Christmas, Thanksgiving time. I decide to stay home with him. My husband, Jeff, leaves like with the kids to his parents or something. And for the next 6 weeks, I'm crawling on the floor with him, making sure he doesn't bump or fall. Literally just crawling on the floor with him for 6 weeks. We like put pool noodles wrapped in like blankets and put him on his crib. He at the time was sleeping with us, thank goodness, in our room. We just didn't have any room for anywhere else. And so when he would fall asleep, it was like my only time when I just like my nervous system settled. And things started getting really bad for me. Like I pulled out all my eyelashes at night in the middle of the night because it was so stressful. And I wouldn't eat. I was just in fight or flight. I was really not okay. And it was about maybe not even like a week into it, maybe 2 weeks into the situation. And so we go to the doctor and she looks at me. She doesn't even look at Henry. And she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not okay." She's like, "You need to get on something. You're not okay. You need to get on something. Like you need an anti-anxiety medicine. You need to get on an antidepressant, something." Like I could tell she was really worried about me. I was really hesitant to get on anything because, first of all, my addiction to phentermine previous, and because I have addiction in my family. And I just had a feeling. And thankfully for me, I had friends who had already been using cannabis medically. And I just never felt called to it. And I never had dipped my toes into any of it. But I had a feeling like spirit came in so strongly. I will never forget. I was praying that night, meditating that night. And it was like, you need to use cannabis. You need to be communing with cannabis to help you with this. So I call my friend and I genuinely think it saved me. I know it saved me. And I would just use it to help me sleep. And I used like a tincture, like a medically given to me tincture. And it saved me. And I told the doctor that I was using that method and she helped me organize and take care of it. And it was perfect. But I didn't tell Jeff for a year because I was afraid he was going to be terrified and scared. And I wanted to prove to him that it wasn't bad. I just knew that I was guided to it. I knew it was okay. And I knew he would flip. And actually, I don't regret it at all. I don't regret not telling him at all because it was everything I needed. It was so important. It was something that really, really helped me back then. Now I can't even touch cannabis. Not just because it doesn't call to me right now, but because I just like, I tried a gummy for sleep when I had COVID and it made me spiral so badly. It was fine. It worked out. It was like a dark night of the soul situation, but it just doesn't call to me. Anyway, I'll never forget because it was exactly a year after I got breast implants, which are now removed. Whole nother story. We've got a lot to cover. And I used it for my recovery instead of narcotics. And that was when I kind of told Jeff. And at that point, that year was like my most successful year of SSJ and also I just felt so connected to Jeff. Like things were getting better. This was right before the lawsuit, by the way, literally right before. And so things were like feeling okay, but then like obviously not okay. But I just wanted to prove to him and show to him. And I felt like really the only way I could was to just keep it from him. So I did. And he wasn't mad. He was like, "Oh, I'm actually really glad that you found something that helped you." Of course, he was concerned about, you know, the how I was using it and everything, but I think it helped that I was using it medically and that I had gotten it medically. So that was the only little bit of experience with plant medicine that I had. Okay. Okay. So then the lawsuit happens. 2020 happens. Actually, I'm sorry. One more thing really quick. Around that same time, I had a good friend who texted me, Doug Cartwright. And he said, "Have you ever tried grandmother ayahuasca?" And I was like, "I don't even know what you're saying. What are you even talking about?" And absolutely not. I don't even know what you're talking, right? I have no idea what you're talking about. And he's like, I commune with it, and I'd love to bring you to a ceremony. And I just was not ready, which is like pretty astonishing for me because I pretty much go into anything. But at that point, I was just not ready. But I will never forget how much that impacted me, that he invited me into that. And then also that I knew that that was something that was a potential possibility or an opportunity. And I'm so grateful he extended that invitation, because if he hadn't, I don't think I would have known that it was something. Now, when I talk about this and when I talk about feeling called, truly it's a calling. You'll know this. If you're listening to me and you've ever can even thought in your subconscious mind, or you've read a post, or you saw something on TikTok, or you read something somewhere, or you heard even someone say plant medicine, and if it sparked any kind of curiosity, that's what we call a calling. Like there is something that calls to you. Literally, Mother Earth will call to you. And at that point, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know that that was the case for me, right? But I also knew I had this tendency to go so hard in everything, because I will literally do anything that helps me that helps me, one, come back to myself, two, connect myself to God and my higher self, three, connect myself to the God within me, which is essentially the same thing as one, and four, to better myself, which is a wrap up of all of one, two, and three. And also, with all that encompassing, it goes to five, which is be the best mother, be the best wife, be the best sister, all the things, right? The best person I could be. So, okay, so we're in 2020. Everything is just 2020. And I'm in this lawsuit and I'm devastated. And Jeff and I are barely talking to each other. It really broke Jeff's heart. The lawsuit really broke his heart, because he had allowed me to, it's interesting that I use those words, but that's really kind of what it was, because we were raised to believe that he was the guide of the household, right? And he had allowed me to grow this business and trusted me. And now we were in this 3 point something, lots of $1 million of lawsuit. And I felt really lost. I felt more lost and alone than I had ever felt. And really confused. And I just didn't know at that point what to do, because I felt very confident in the person that I was. But I felt like the world around me was just becoming more and more chaotic. And it was really painful, and it was really confusing. And I just felt like I wanted more answers, and I needed more answers. And one night when I think I was driving around somewhere, I remember I was alone, and immediately I heard grandmother ayahuasca. And I was like, oh. And at this point, sorry guys, I have to go back a little bit. Like things are coming back. Not like I ever forgot them, but like just so much happened that year. So I'm in this lawsuit. Jeff and I are like really struggling. And then my dear, dear friend Kim dies of cancer. Kim and I's story is very interesting because we actually didn't know each other very long, maybe 2 years max. But I found her through my friend Kate Call, and I sent her my meditations. At that point, I was launching courses in meditations and to help her because she was really uncomfortable. She was really itchy with things happening with her liver. She had this really, really rare liver cancer. Anyway, she loved the meditations. I move from Salt Lake City up to like northern Utah area, and she just happens to be my next door neighbor. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. So she comes over right when I move and like brings me snacks and treats and is like, your meditations changed me. I can't wait to be best friends and live by each other. Anyway, things just like escalated so quickly. We completely bonded. She would come and work at my house in the morning. We went on backpacking, a huge backpacking trip. And it's crazy how everything always comes together because of my nursing experience. And I literally lived 6 houses down from her. And her husband at the time was working in Elko as a dentist. Sometimes she'd be alone, and sometimes there was this particular time when I was in her life was when she was really struggling. I mean, she struggled and fought for this cancer many, many years. So there were many times when I would drive her down to the ICU and I'd sleep with her in the hospital room and I'd help take care of her. And then I was able and honored to help her pass on and be there with her. And that was a really powerful experience. One that genuinely changed my life for many reasons. One, Kim has a way of changing people's lives. Kim has a way of, everybody that knows her, even everyone that knew her from her Instagram was changed. But for me, obviously being able to serve her was massively special. And it's something that I genuinely think about all the time because I also feel like she's with me all the time. I feel like she's everywhere, because her physical body isn't holding her in this space anymore. But she did something really special for me. And that was believing in me maybe more than anybody else had. I'll never forget, there is a lot of intimate conversations and experiences I had with Kim that I have never shared. Some are really difficult to think back to and look at, especially the last when she was in the ICU for those 21 days. I think it was 21 days, her last lung surgery. By the time she passed, she only had like 10%, 25% of her lung left. I don't even remember now. I'm botching these numbers. Anyway, when she was in the hospital during that time, specifically, we were sitting on her bed. There was a couple moments when she had come back. She had been passing. We didn't know this, but the cancer had covered her entire body after that surgery. And we thought that she was just fighting the recovery of that last surgery. Little did we know it was metastasizing everywhere on her body. But there was one night that I'll never forget. A lot of nights I'll never forget, but she wanted candy, which she never does. Kim, ever since I met her, which like I said was a very short time, she fought for every single breath to the point where she would home make all of her food. She would not eat anything processed. Like, she meticulously took care of her body so she could live. Watching her live and exist, just that alone completely changed how I live my life, completely changed how I see every breath. Actually, it was my very first tattoo that I got visible was her writing of the word warrior on her wrist. We were all supposed to get it together. She was supposed to get one too, but because it's a constant reminder to never take life for granted. So, So it was very rare that she wanted candy. It was like, what? And I just remember coming with like bagfuls, like, what do you want? I will give you anything. And we were sitting on her bed and she was smiling and I was on the foot of her bed, rubbing the edema out of her feet. And she looks at me and goes, Sadie, are you happy? She goes, Sadie, are you living life the way you want to live your life? Because I know you live life differently than a lot of us, Sadie, she said. And I know it feels scary. And I said, I think so, Kim. I'm trying to be brave. And she looked at me and said, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, as long as you are living the way you want to live. She said, Sadie, every single day, go live. Unapologetically, amongst no one's rules but yours. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's essentially what she said. And that permission and her belief in me changed everything. And at that point, I had hundreds of thousands of people in my community, right? Women were messaging me all the time about these meditations changing their lives and changing their kids' lives. But it meant different. It meant something different for me because for the past 10 days up until that point, I watched and held her hand as she fought for every breath. And as she looked at me with horror, with that CPAP machine on her face, just begging for relief or reprieve. And it means something different coming from somebody fighting for their life, I think. Especially from her. She was stubborn and powerful and special. And her death actually happened a lot sooner than we had anticipated, because she had just had this huge surgery. She just came home and we thought that, what Kim does is she has surgery, she gets healthy, she gets strong, she hikes a mountain, and then she gets sick again. That was kind of the rotation. And it's the craziest story, actually. I had gone to Costa Rica on a trip with Jeff, and right before I left, I was helping in the hospital and giving her kisses goodbye and all those things. And then I left, and I was on the flight home, and the flight attendant came up and gave me this paper bag with this bottle covered in a paper bag, which was weird. I don't drink alcohol, and I wasn't obviously drinking on the plane, but he handed it to me and he said, "This is for your pain." I am not making this up. I still have the wine bottle. "This is for your pain." So I grabbed the wine, I grabbed the bottle. I was like, thanks. And I open it. I don't know different wines. I have no idea, but it was like this really pretty cover, and it was like this red wine. Anyway, I just put it in my bag. And then I turned on my phone after we were landing, and I had a voice note from Kim's mom, Jane, and she had told me that the doctors found that the cancer had spread everywhere on her body. And she had passed not even 7 days later on Valentine's Day. Of course, she passed on Valentine's Day. And grief is really difficult to navigate, especially when it's grieving somebody that had such an impact on so many people. And so it was really interesting to navigate grief, navigate her funeral, navigate the celebration of her life, all with so many different opinions and so many different ways to love her, and so many people that loved her so much. And it just brought a lot of heartache. And it's one thing to grieve. It's another thing to grieve while there's other things happening, like being a mother or a lawsuit or contention with a marriage, or just literally living. There's nothing like trying to grieve somebody and the world just continues to turn. I'll never forget that when my brother passed, I couldn't understand why everybody was just doing normal things in life, and I felt like I couldn't even breathe. I felt that again when Kim passed. I felt very confused as to how to keep going. Because even though we weren't friends for very long, we were absolutely connected from other lives. And I lived in such close proximity to her and brought her fruits and wiped her counters. And it was just such an honor. And I'm so grateful that I'm still so connected to Tragan and Hensley, her daughter, and her husband. And I love them so much. And all of her family is just so special to me, and all the connections that I've made since becoming friends with her. But that was a side note. What a gift. What a gift that was. But that was an interesting part of the chaos that was surrounding my 2020. And Jeff and I really, really were disconnected and living outside of each other easily. We were finding friendship and connection outside of each other, absolutely. And trying to grieve and trying to understand the climate of the world. And just, I also feel like another big piece of this was I was consistently trying to convince him to quit his job because I believed in my business, and I believed that if we could work together, it would be really special, which is interesting because a lot of people suggest to not do that. But I just knew, and he wouldn't. And I felt frustrating that I was consistently even still trying to prove to him or to people close to me that I could do it, that like this was a big deal. Like I knew this was going to work. So there was just disconnect. And so that was in February. And then June 22nd, 2020, I sat with grandmother for the first time. So the beginning of June was really, really dark. And I just told Jeff that I don't think I want to stay married, and I don't know what to do at this point. And I don't feel loved and appreciated. And I don't think I'm loving and appreciating myself. And I just feel so confused and all these things. And it got really bad. I think we can all understand this because when he worked from home, he literally only worked from home it wasn't very long, guys. It was like maybe 2 weeks. He literally could not do it. And that really affected me. I was like, oh, I mean, it affected everybody. When we couldn't go anywhere, we were really met with our shadows. When we couldn't go and see anything, when we couldn't distract ourselves, when we couldn't go and hustle, when we had to sit with stillness, when we had to sit our asses in our houses, that was when we really saw ourselves. And some of the things I liked and some of the things I didn't like. And one of the things I didn't love was that I felt like he didn't want to be here. And it was too chaotic and the kids were hard. And I actually don't blame him. None of this do I blame him. I can't wait to get him on this podcast because I'm talking about a lot of things that were in the past. But guys, Jeff is superior, the most kind, sweet, gentle man. And I'm so grateful for him. And I'm so grateful for our marriage. And I might get shit for talking about things in the past, but it's fine because it's my truth and it doesn't matter anymore. It all has a purpose. Okay. So yeah, that really affected me. I was like, oh my gosh, he can't even be here. So I texted my friend Doug and I said, Doug, I need to find a ceremony stat. And now looking back, now that I understand the intricacies of the plant medicine world, I didn't actually understand just how crazy it was, especially during the height of the pandemic, how crazy it was that I found a ceremony so quickly. It wasn't even like a week, which if you've ever sat with grandmother, you understand this isn't like you just go and sit with a hallucinogen. This is like the deepest, most intense, intimate, sacred prep for anything I had ever done, which actually I'm so grateful for that because I was really scared. I was like, is this a cult? Am I doing something wrong? Is this against God? Like all of these things I was fearing, but my fear of not being able to get out of this rut that I was in was far outweighing any of that. I was willing literally to do anything. And this very much felt like it came into my life like hypnotherapy. And even hypnotherapy didn't feel weird to me, which coming from a girl who's never done therapy, that's pretty big. So, so he's like, yes, actually, there's one in a week in Salt Lake. I couldn't believe it. I don't even know how he did it. And I bet if you asked him, he wouldn't know either. But somehow he signed me up and I got an email telling me all about the prep and all the things. And what's crazy is that he hadn't even sat with these particular shamans before. So it's insane. I am so grateful. I am so grateful. It genuinely changed my life. So let me tell you a little about my first ceremony and we'll end there. So I read the email and I was like, what is happening? Okay, so you have to wear a white. Okay, so I can't eat meat. Okay, so I can't be on any kind of SSRIs. I can't be on any kind of prescription medications. I'm not supposed to have sex because I have to like keep, well, I didn't know the reasonings really at that point. I just was like, I will do anything. I will literally do anything. So I followed the diet as strictly as possible. I didn't understand why I needed to wear white. I didn't really understand any of it. I didn't even know anything. I didn't Google anything. A lot of people Google, which scares them away from this medicine. I just had full trust. I had never done any kind of hallucinogens. I had never done any kind of anything other than a little bit of cannabis. And I had drank a little bit, like late high school, early college, but that was it. That was it. So I genuinely had no experiences with any kind of substances. But I was ready. I was willing to do anything. And Jeff was on board too. And I walk into this place in Salt Lake. These particular shamans were actually from Hawaii and they were doing tours. They do tours twice a year in the spring and in the fall. And they like live there and they grow medicine there. And it's just like really, really special. I didn't know any of this. I just was like, whatever, here we go. I walk in and there's these like really hippie looking people in the front, like just really hippie people. And I was like, cool, here we go, and I set up my mat in the corner and I'm like in the corner in the back. And it's this like pretty big like auditorium, like kind of thing. And I didn't realize how early I was. So I like literally just sat in meditation for like literally hours thinking like, when is it going to happen? When is this thing going to happen? I didn't realize you had to wait until it was dark. And people kept filing in and just filing in and filing in. I was genuinely shook how many people could fit in that room. I'm not kidding when I say like 70, 80 people. It was astonishing. I was so confused. I'm like, okay, this is cool. This is fine. We're fine. Somehow I ended up sitting next to the person who owned this place. And there was like this cute little cat that he had that was around there. The cat comes in later. Just wait. I actually have never told in detail any of my ceremonies, but I really want to share a lot of them here. So we'll see what comes up. We'll see what comes up about them. Okay. So where do I go next? So most people are wearing white. Some people are wearing darker clothes. Some people are talking, hugging each other. You can tell it's like community. I know no one, not one person do I know. I'm like so out of my league here. And they don't really explain anything. They kind of just start, like it starts to get dark and then everyone kind of gets quiet and he has like this shaky leaf thing, which now it's called a shakapa. And he starts his thing. And I sat there and I was closing my eyes and I was in meditation and I heard him start singing. And I whip my head around because I was like, what? Because it was the most gorgeous. Now, I hadn't taken any medicine at this point, okay? The most beautiful, gorgeous, powerful voice I'd ever heard. And I was like, excuse me? And I just start bawling because music has always played a very intricate piece and part in my life. I grew up with Earth, Wind, and Fire. My mom always had music playing, always. If there was one thing that connected us, it was music. She played the piano. We would sing as sisters on the piano. My sister would play and we'd harmonize. My grandma loved singing. We sang to her as she passed on through the veil, when she passed on her life. Like, singing's always been really important to me. I sang in high school. I sang at my graduation, actually. Randomly, I sang a duet with my friend Susie. But I never really actually worked on my voice. I sang to my kids at night. Anyway, singing, big deal. So I didn't know. I had no idea that singing was such a huge piece of the ceremony. So immediately I'm emotional because it was, if you understand anything about song, about sound, it's literally what everybody used before they found out about these healing plants on the earth to heal, to get through these beta and theta waves, to literally reprogram your brain through sound. It's actually so powerful. And actually, it's the vessel as to how the medicine works. You literally move through the ceremony with sound, with these Icaros, which are prayers, singing prayers. You can literally move the frequency and move the energy and move through these powerful, incredible songs that I had never heard. The most beautiful songs I've ever heard in my life. And I've never heard them on the radio. There's like this whole other world out there, this plant medicine world. That's a whole nother world. I'll just say that. But they have beautiful songs, powerful songs from all over, from Peru and Brazil and Mexico and Hawaii and Native American and Quechua and Lakota and all these incredible ancestors that have weaved these songs through these lineages and pass them on through ethically, hopefully. That's a whole nother story, is the ethical game around plant medicine, that I will absolutely get into because it's extremely important to me. But these songs from all these different ethnicities and all these different lineages. So I drink the medicine and nothing really happens. And then I drink another cup. There's 3 cups. I don't know why I just forgot that. And after the second cup, it hit me. And I remember looking up and seeing the 5D and I remember looking at my hand, and my hand was see-through, but it was multidimensional. And there was all these codes and numbers and lines. And I looked up and I saw this pyramid and this gorgeous, I was in the 5D dimension. Okay. So we live in the 3D. We live in the 3D with polarity. We have these bodies that are very full of mass, right? The 5D is an extension. It's beyond our comprehension because it's beyond the mass that we have in these bodies. It's as if you can see, I was going to say like a horse, but the horse's eyes are on the sides of its head. That's why I can see, but it's truly like that. Like it's like you can just see around you, and not just around you in this time and space, but time collapses. I'm going straight into the woo here. So here we go. But it's like every life happens, every life that you've ever had or that you could potentially have, all happens now. So one of my big hesitations with sitting with grandmother, or because I honestly didn't know what was going to happen, but I let my imagination run with me. And I remember thinking, I don't want dark spirits to come into me. I don't want to play with this because I don't want that. That feels really scary. And I've had that experience because I had it as a child, right? I'm like, I don't want to experience that. So something really interesting happened. And you have to listen to this whole thing, okay? You have to listen to the whole story before you make any judgments. If I'm going to tell you the whole story, you have to do it with an open mind. Yes? We choose into this experience together. That's what I say every time I open up a container with all of my people. I'm like, every time we choose into this experience, radical sovereign accountability. Okay. So I was really nervous about what would show up. Like, are ghosts going to show up? Are spirits going to show up? Is something going to possess my body? I genuinely just, that was my fear. And, and the 5D started coming, and I felt everything, and I could feel, and I couldn't look at anybody's faces because it was just so intense. It was so intense. But what I noticed is that what I was scared of were the men, the people that were walking in the dark clothing. And what I realized is they wear light clothing so that, because the energy can feel really dense, and the light clothing helps the energy feel lighter. And what I realized is that Satan isn't real. Literally, the second I said that, my porch chair started swinging back and forth. It must be Leo. That's so funny. Satan isn't real outside of us. I was thinking that there were going to be some kind of spirits or something coming at me. But what I noticed is actually the Satan that I was so worried about coming was in the people, in the dark clothing. And I watched them and I immediately thought, they are here for me. I'm supposed to be watching them in their darkness because they are a reflection of me. They came here. I literally thought this. I thought that everybody was here for me. I thought that it was all orchestrated. Everything was perfect so that I could learn my lesson, which is actually a really incredible thought. But I remember thinking, somebody told them, wear dark clothes so Sadie can see this contrast. So I saw them, and I saw them in their darkness, and I thought, Satan isn't real unless there is a body, a physical body, to actualize what the truth of Satan is. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when that thought came in, I started dancing with this cartoon devil who I had given so much my power, so much of my energy, so much of myself to my entire life, when really I was giving that in myself. I was the one perpetrating that energy. I realized that Satan isn't real outside of me. I am Satan. I am the one that creates negativity and energy. And I'm also the one that can dissipate that. I'm also the one that can alchemize that. I'm also the one that can fix that and change that. Now, of course, is there positive and negative in the world? Yes. But does it affect me if I let it? If I let it, yes. If I don't let it, I have the choice. I have the power. So that was my first lesson in sovereignty. My first true lesson in, oh my gosh, I got this. Oh my gosh, I don't have to be worried about somebody coming and taking my body. I don't have to be worried about somebody possessing my body. I have the choice. I have the choice of whether or not I'm going to allow fear to perpetuate this idea of this person and this entity that can get into me. That thought is the entity. Your thoughts are the entities. So I watched these people and I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. And then one of the helpers was wearing darker clothes, and there's this one flame. Okay, also remember, I didn't get any advice. No advice. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, I have no advice. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to do. I remember I asked the person next to me, do you have any advice? And they just said, remember to breathe through your nose. I was like, okay. So one of the helpers, I was also told to remember the flame in the middle. So there's this central altar, and it holds like insane, beautiful technology. And when I say technology, I literally mean like it helps the frequency of the energy. It helps to move the energy. It helps to move. It helps to move. It helps to alchemize with the light, and it helps you move through the different things that you're moving through. Because with grandmother and with this medicine and technology, because literally she's this divine celestial technology, you're moving through things so quickly. And when you don't, sometimes you can get in these like spirals and kind of stay there. That's not the spiral isn't the word that I'm thinking of, or the word that I want to think of. Just these stories. And if you don't know the tools on how to like get out of that story, you can stay there for a while. So So it was getting really intense, and I noticed this thing, and I was dancing with the devil, and I started feeling really sick. And so I was like, okay, breathe, breathe, breathe. And then I was looking at the candle, and I didn't understand that I could literally give the energy to the candle, because the central altar is the place where you literally alchemize, where you give, and you even purge, and you can purge through so many ways. A lot of people are scared of grandmother because of how she moves energy. So the purging is literally just a way to move energy. And purging can be obviously from throwing up, but also can be yawning. It can be crying. It can be laughing. It can be purging just like dry heaving. It can be dancing. It can be singing. All these different things. Moving, shaking, somatics. I didn't know any of that at that time because I didn't know what I was doing, but I've learned that as I've continued to learn and become a student of hers, because it's been so life-changing for me. So, a helper sat next to the candle. Obviously, it wasn't intentioned. I felt like it was intentional because I felt like literally everything was happening exactly for me. It was the craziest thing to see, like a bird's eye view of like my whole ceremony. But he sat right in front of the candle, and I thought, oh, he did that on purpose. He did that on purpose so that I could feel the darkness. He did that on purpose so I could find my own light. So I remember like actualizing the light within me and then moving my body so that I could see the light. And then I was like, it's okay. I have the power. And then I started feeling sick again. And I was just feeling this awakening and this understanding of nothing is outside of myself. Nothing is outside of myself. And that is one of the most freeing and also terrifying realizations, because then you realize the power that you hold, but also the accountability, the responsibility that you have, right? So one of the shamans comes over. She's just the sweetest, best, beautiful. She like whispers in my ear, and she's like, how are you doing? And I was like, it's just so much. It's just so much. It was a lot of energy. And she was like, you can let go. You can let it go. You can let it go. Surrender. And I purged. And it was actually the most beautiful, powerful, incredible purge of my life. And what I thought I saw in there was like literally, this is going to get intense, guys. Okay. I'm not going to be sorry about it. This is what you asked for on the Simply Wild podcast. I purged these huge, nasty ass slugs. And what I had purged is this idea of Satan, this idea that somebody could take this away from me, this idea that I didn't have the power within myself, all of this. And it was so incredible. I sat back up and I was on my hands and knees, and the light got brighter. And it was the light of Christ. It was literally the light of God. And all of a sudden, this overwhelming peace came over me. And I knew that everything was going to be okay because I knew I had the power within me. And then the last part of the ceremony was just actually insane because I turned into a jaguar. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even lying. I was on my hands and knees, and what she had come, the shaman had come over to me to tell me and ask me if I was okay. And then after I purged, she came back. She's like, how are you feeling? I was like, good. I just want to move. She's like, move, like do yoga, like it'll help. So I thought it was a pitch black room and no one could see me. And there was this music and there was a djembe and drums. So I start moving my hips really like intensely. Like I was alchemizing and clearing so much energy. I'm so grateful it was so pitch dark because I really did feel safe to just be on my yoga mat and move. I had my hood on. I put my hood on. And I had brought like a sheepskin, and the sheepskin turned into me and I turned it into the jaguar. And I literally I became like this beautiful cat jaguar who was able to freely move for myself and just like move the movement felt so good, and I could feel like repressed trauma. I could feel repressed sexual energy just like moving through me. It was so beautiful. And it's crazy because remember I sat next to the house cat, and the house cat and I were homies until I turned into a jaguar. I'm not even kidding. And it came by me, and I reached out my hand at one point and it scratched me. Like it literally thought we were fighting. It was like hissing at me because I was a jaguar. Anyway, so much other things happened, and it was a whirlwind because it was so intense, but it changed everything for me. It changed everything for me. A lot of the stuff I didn't understand at that point. I just went for it. And one of the things it changed for me was that I could choose what I fought for and what I didn't. I had the power. Okay. And I think up until that point, I had really been in victim, even through my spiritual journey. Because even up until that point, I was very much like, oh, why didn't I learn this sooner? Oh, why did this have to happen to me? Oh, why do I feel so different? Or why couldn't I have been in a different place at a different time? Or why doesn't my husband support me? Or why do I feel like I'm the weird one? Like there was always this idea of victimhood that I never really actually understood until I sat with grandmother. And here's the interesting part. Another interesting part is I have never been taught sovereignty the way that I've been taught in plant medicine. So the cool thing about grandmother is she can never create, but she does amplify. And so every time I've had a ceremony, which I've had many now that I will share, but every time I have, she has amplified something that I have allowed to come into me that is not mine. So I'm able to really see. And the other thing that's really beautiful about grandmother is she will never show you anything that you're not ready for. And I am really grateful for that, because with that knowledge and knowing, I always knew I would be okay. Now, I didn't really understand that until I had sat a handful of times. I was just balls to the wall. I'm just like, this is working. This is helping me. This is incredible. And also, I'll say a little bit of knowledge too. If anyone has or struggles with addiction, this is actually the medicine that they as in the world, although it's looked at as deemed as negative in some parts of the world, or people just don't know about it or whatever. But it's the medicine that people use to get off of their addictions. It is incredibly healing. Not just the spiritual benefits, but the physical benefits are incredible. And obviously, I had to detox from all of my energy drinks and my Adderall and all those things to come back to myself. And it was one of the only times I have felt so sovereign and clean and clear in my vessel that it just started this trajectory in my life. And one thing I don't think a lot of people, or maybe I haven't heard about a lot of people talking about, I think that it's becoming more prevalent now, is that the work actually starts after the ceremony. The work actually starts in integration. And that's where we'll end. Because once I said yes to learning about grandmother, my whole entire life continued to shift and change. And actually, we're not going to end there. I'm going to say one more thing. Once I started working with grandmother, I made a choice as my voice, as my platform, as my privilege with my audience and my community and the women that I teach, and now the men that I teach. I made a choice to never talk about religion again, and instead approach spirituality from a spiritual place. That's it. And that includes the religion of plant medicine. That includes the religion of this woke spiritual culture that you have to do A, B, and C, and D to have spirituality. I don't subscribe to any of it. And so if you're looking for a place to go or a place to find comfort in knowing for sure that there's a place or this place or this place, my place, this Simply Wild place, this Simply Sadie Jane place, this community, What I do is to help you find your unique frequency, your unique medicine, your unique spirituality. So as I share about my experiences with plant medicine, as I share about my experiences with my chakra clearings or my hypnotherapy or my yoga, please remember that they're my experiences. And that if they feel like they're sparking something in you and a curiosity in you, I am here for you. And we're going to go on this journey together. And if not, that's okay too. But I realized that by talking about specific things and specific organizations, it was keeping me from what I'm supposed to do on this earth. And genuinely, what I'm supposed to do is help you find your own unique path. And so in Simply Wild, you will not hear me talk about any kind of structure, foundation, religion, because it's just bigger than that for me. I love you, and I hope you do something wild today to help you get back to your own wild. And we are just getting started. So come back for part 100. Just kidding, part 5. As I go a little deeper into my experiences with plant medicine and where I'm at in my life now. I love you. I love you.